So, thank you. I mean, it's the first time that I've been mentioned as a pop star. I really feel good about it. You feel a rock star, pop star, whatever. I mean, that's for a boring consultant, it feels really good. So, our topic is Switch, and let me just give you a couple of data. In Germany, there are 4.6 million public servants. 4.6 million public servants. And since 2008, the number of students who decide that they would like to apply for a public service position has increased from 120,000 to 140,000. So there is an enormous wish to go into a stable employment. First data. Second data, the willingness to found a company has decreased from 29% to 15% in Germany. We are at the same level as Pakistan and some other countries, which I don't remember now. But I mean, we are not leading edge. So the situation is that the willingness to go into risk and the risk appetite seems to have decreased, and at the same time, we know that there is an enormous quest for innovation, a need for innovation, a need for creativity, and the third data is that most of the DAX companies have been involved in restructuring efforts, and if you ask them what is the number one value creation lever, it is streamlining. So having said that, it was fantastic, and Christine, that you wrote this article, this commentary. I don't mention in which publication because it's not a Hubert Burda publication, but it was a very good
paper, which is something we should mention even here.
Yes, actually. So you wrote something about switching, switching between corporate careers. So that is what we want to discuss about. So.
Thank you, Antonella. Yes, the reason is just to say one word about what I'm doing in day-to-day life. I've been a professor for entrepreneurial finance, so you would believe that everything looks like a nail to a man with a hammer. I would believe finance helps, but I must say whenever I hear these statistics about entrepreneurship and I feel it, that I believe that the call you have in every single article that says if we only had more money, more venture capital, we would have in entrepreneurial culture more startups in Germany, that this jumps by far too short. It's much more than finance only. Obviously, it's important. But if you look at the successful innovation clusters we have in the world, you see, yes, you have money, but you also have a high degree of mobility of people between startup companies, mid-sized companies, and the big established companies. And if you talk to young people, for example, of whether they would become startup entrepreneurs, it's very open or very often exactly what Antonella managed, this idea of having a secure job and this question, if I go into the startup industry, and not all of them are founders, we also need people who work in these industries. If I go into that industry, will I ever find my way back, into an established company? So we're talking about opportunity cost at the working markets. And it's absolutely right they're having that doubt. That is the bad news about it. Because if you look at the hiring policy of big companies, what they do is they hire very young people directly when they come from university, or they hire experts years later, which has been a problem, for example, for all these people some years ago who decided to leave the investment banking industry and wanted to switch to what we say real economy. So it's something that isn't only attached to the startup people, but here it becomes very important because it means opportunity costs are so high because people are not employed. That a lot of people don't enter the startup scene because they believe that there's no way out of it. So the article I wrote was on the whole issue that I said, look, this is a lose-lose because if, we were better in hiring and integrating those people who wanted to change for whatever reason, they might also change because they suddenly have 4 kids and want more stability than when they're 25, that on the one side, we as an industry, as an economy should work on integrating people, and on the other side, it's a huge loss for the industry because it's exactly those people who are entrepreneurs, who have been with innovation technologies, and so that would help to break up a bit the culture in the big companies, so it would help both sides. So that was an appel, so to say. Yeah?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I totally share this, but, let me just give you also a couple of observations about what is not working today in companies. I mean, just to start, I mean, at BCG, we observed for many years that the number of people going out of consulting, has increased steadily from 6 to 7% to now 8 to 10%. And we started to do an effort to get them back. Because some of them, as you said, I mean, they change, I mean, they want, they have a different life planning, or, some have failed, which I think is a fantastic thing, because they learned a lot, And then we integrate them, and we have a program to integrate them. But that is something that we discovered only after seeing that it didn't work. And that is not something that usually companies have. So the usual reaction is, you have a stable career path and a very, very determined career path, and there is no entry point for people who are coming from the startup scene. And once you come back, actually, you are a creative disruptor. And a creative disruptor doesn't fit into the general approach to value creation that most corporates have, which is based on efficiency management, and efficiency management and creative disruption don't go together. So some companies have found a workaround by creating what I call the creative reservat, I mean, it's some, sort of keep them on the side, in accelerators, incubators, or other forms where, you can, you have them there, they can disrupt there, but they don't disrupt your main sequence, And the real issue that we need to think about is, okay, is that a good reaction? I mean, shall we suggest that most of the corporates should create accelerators and incubators? And would that be a good a good ground of reintegration of creative minds? And then, is there a way then, perhaps a different approach to reintegrate them in the main sequence? And I think that is probably the question that I have to you.
That's the big question, because you should never just write something in the press and ask for something without thinking about the practical implications, even if you're a professor. So we discussed it a lot, and I think there are two ways that are important. What we've seen from business consultants changing, investment bankers, that they either go into the strategy department or into the finance section. So we know exactly that they're kind of phased in like deep sea divers, that they need some time, in this secured place, and then they enter the organization. But both departments are not right for startup people, because startup people want to be operative. So the only kind of in-between life you could think of are corporate incubators, or these departments. But I think this is not the whole solution. And we've been discussing it for hours also with our startup people and with companies. And I got a very good email, actually. I got a lot of very interesting reactions, and I learned that from our article. It really helps to point to something, to get ideas from other people. I got a very interesting email from one of the board members from Linde, because who read it, and he said, look, we personally have had very good experiences hiring people, who have that background, but there are two specific factors that will have helped. And they hired them directly into the operative arms, but they integrated them in groups. And that's it depends on two things. First, you need a group that helps that person to assimilate and that is willing to take that person, because what you normally have, and we know this from all the debates about diversity, that big companies have immune reactions. So to help with this immune reaction, that you have to have everything that is different, and Germans don't like disruption that much. You need a group that helps that person. I thought that was very clever. And the second thing is that if you have a boss who himself has been outside, if you have a boss who had seen venture capital, private equity industry, or something else, he will be more open. So I think what is important is that companies know that they don't hire people. Very interesting, several companies were not aware of that problem. They discussed with me and said, we would love to take those people. And I said, okay, if you would love to take those people, where would they apply? And then they found out there's no way in. And then even one company, which is, I can say, Kamüller, said, look, if you have someone who wants to apply, send him over, even if he didn't post a job, which I thought was great. So I think it's two things, becoming aware and then discussing what Boston did. How do you phase them in? with programs.
No, absolutely, and I think the phasing in is an important activity, and phasing in is one thing, but the issue, I think that there is a big issue that the typical creative startup entrepreneur, innovator, disruptor needs two things. He needs no control. I mean, freedom. Freedom to act. And normally you have a control freakish culture in companies. And the second thing is support to try for trial and error, and the failure culture that allows you to really test and learn, and fast failure. And I think that is what makes it, if I observe, I work a lot in technology, and if I observe the typical culture that you find in the valley, in the valley you have overall the spark soup, this fantastic mixture of venture capitalists, innovators, creators, people who are, who approach things, and people from the corporate world that work together. This spark soup is working well, but in the companies you have also this fast failure culture. You are allowed to try, you are allowed to fail, but then you need quickly to get to the next one, which I don't find is a very common trait in corporates. And I'm really interested to hear what your observation is, since you are in a couple of corporate boards.
I would totally share this, that Germany is very good in step-to-step innovation and bad in disruptive innovation, because that's exactly not the way we like. We like to have everything absolutely perfect, like someone called it perfect innovation these days. But to come to the companies to be positive, when I'm talking about mobility, it's meant as a mobility two ways. It means startup people should go and be able to go join the big companies, but it also means that it's very important for startup companies who are innovative and all this, disruptive, to be able to plug the know-how of big companies. And to give you an example, we at the Technical University have actually the biggest entrepreneurship center in Europe, which is called Unternehmertum, and we have one company which is called Flexibus, which is a virtual bus operator for long distance transportation. So they have been hiring 100 people in 1 year only. And they were, apart from the entrepreneurs, you had very much a need from the knowledge of the standard industries, which means, for example, that if you're in long-distance transportation, you would need people from Deutsche Bahn, So it's good. We're not even talking about highly specialized people, but they also have people for building up operations. For example, one person who's in charge has been at Aldi. One other person, which I found interesting, has been with one of the big consulting companies, who's the head of business development. And I asked them, I said, so how did you find those people from the standard industry, to join you? Because it's a big issue of salaries in Germany. It's about salaries, them wishing to join, and it's about finding them, And, this consulting company had a leave of absence program, so to say, which we all know. And I thought that was a clever idea to enable someone who was a business consultant to look at that and say to see whether he wants to jump finally or not.
I have to smile because it's very interesting. We have the leave of absence program for our consultants, and we are also in slight panic because we know when somebody wants to go on leave of absence, he normally utilizes that for testing and doing some startup activity. And the only thing that we normally hope is that they're not just landing in the Samba group, because that it's then they are they disappear, that they try their own, and ideally, I mean, if they have the appetite to come back, then that they come back. But I think that the leave of absence is a great thing, and very interestingly, I had a discussion with the Deutsche Bahn about this, and they are introducing a leave of absence. And one of the senior directors at Deutsche Bahn called me the other day to say, well, I'm thinking, what do you think? I would like to go into a startup and do that. And I found, wow, I mean, if we succeed to have a couple of companies, I mean, we don't need 200 companies, we don't need the whole DAX, but if we succeed perhaps in 5-6 companies, which you wouldn't expect that they're doing this, to introduce a program for people from the corporate world to go and test to work with startups. You know, it could be 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and experience how it is. And on the other side, to give them some suggestion about how they could integrate beyond accelerators and integrators, integrate in the normal career paths. And one needs to really think hardly where. I mean, clearly, there are some areas in companies where it's more difficult to integrate the creative disruptors, if they are really creative disruptors. But there might be areas where it's easier to integrate them. If we could just win 4 or 5 companies, I think it would be great, and it would already create some reference cases where you show that this fluidity, this permeability is really working well. And of course, then one needs to we will need to get the proof of concept, just showing that it works and that people jump right and back and forth doesn't answer the problem. The problem is only answered if we then see the first results out of it. If we see that innovation is being stimulated by that, and that there are areas where it's coming. So perhaps, do you think that we can win? I mean,
perhaps I think you're coming.
We have Linde. We have. Where are you on the board? Perhaps you can bring that forward.
We could auction off the place here in 1 year to speak about the experiences. I think we should. Steffi shall make it happen, but I think you're mentioning something that might be a great idea. One of the reactions I got to my article was by the head of Tengelmann, who said to me, look, I feel that what the startup people have achieved in Germany is that suddenly the notion of failure becomes acceptable. He said, this is something that goes much beyond the startup scene because it's a cultural aspect, And so, we have been discussing that, a lot already years ago. I think it's a structural issue of the German job market, but we all stick to what we're doing. Unlike other countries, we don't have people who go from politics to economy and media and vice versa, which is something totally natural. If the startup scene would really manage for the first time to break up those very strong patterns in Germany, and we would see it works, it could help a lot of other fields in society too in Germany, where I think professors being in boards and board people going to universities, and what I think, this constant intellectual help of the one to the other that helps. Where if we take your idea, that could be of a much bigger help on a bigger scope.
No, absolutely. I think learning more to do it with fluidity, I think is great. I think there are 2 other things that I would like to address. One thing is, and that's where perhaps women can play a role. There is a strong fixation on careers. And there was an interview series that was done with young graduates about what how they want to approach their life. And the interesting thing was that a majority of people, a strong majority of people said, what I want to do is I want to construct my career. This career fixation, I think, is not really helpful. And the interesting thing is that males are more career fixated than females, women, and it could be that there is a higher openness to this fluidity in the women world, and I think that perhaps it would be great to find some key examples, not only the 5 top corporates, but also 5 great examples of women who have been in the startup scene and are willing to go there. And I mean, anyhow, we need that. That fluidity anyhow for women overall, because there is not just the fact that you are going in a startup and you fail and then you want to come back, or you don't fail but you change your planning because you have kids and so on. So we need anyhow to be much more capable to accommodate that. So I think that's the career thing is the not being too fixated on careers, I think is one thing. And the other thing is on this failure culture that I would address. I think that there is a lot, and again, women can play a role, when we educate our kids. I think that teaching them that failure is good, as Steve Jobs said, the greatest thing that happened to him was when he was kicked out from Apple in the first time, because he said, I was so fixated on being successful, and then I moved on being fixated on restarting. And my energy and his energy really moved into the restart job and in getting the full creativity on the ground. And I think that is probably something that we need to transmit much more to the kids, and I mean, we can start in our own family, perhaps. I don't know if you think that this is something we should do.
Absolutely. I think it absolutely starts, as so many things, when they're very young and not when they're 18, 19, but with the way you live, but also the values to teach them.
So we have a couple of takeaways that I would like to finish. I mean, the time is over anyhow, but just a couple of takeaways. First of all, we want to win 5 corporates to be open to this, and we want to win some Steffi speakers here next DLD. Whatever, DLD, women, so number 1. Second thing, we want absolutely to have a couple of examples, ideally with some women who are of reintegrators in the corporate world, who have been in the startup scene and are reintegrated. And I think, yes, I think that's the second thing, And then we have a to-do for all of us who have already kids, who plan to have kids, who have done social freezing, as it is called, to get kids later, whatever, in whatever bucket you are. We want to teach our kids to become that failure is good, that failure is part of life, and that it can generate a lot of learnings. And I think then if we just put these 3 takeaways, I'm sure that we will diminish the number of people who want to go into public service.
I think that's so very important, that it's not something you have to live with, failure, but that's the teaching you're getting better through it.
Yeah. Excellent. I think we're done. Steffi, I hope it's okay. Yeah. Thank you.